Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mok-yeon. The economy is once again a decisive issue that could sway voter sentiment in South Korea's upcoming presidential election. On May 18th, the four leading candidates, Jae-myung of the Democratic Party, Moon-soo of the People Power Party, Jun-seok of the Reform Party, and Kwon Young-guk of the Democratic Labor Party faced off in their first televised debate. With Korea stuck in a prolonged period of low growth, soaring inequality, and deepening regional disparity, each candidate laid out their vision to revive the everyday economy. So from job creation and fiscal policies to trade and labor reform, the stakes couldn't be higher. Voters are no longer content with slogans. They're demanding realistic and concrete solutions. So on Within the Frame tonight, we break down what each economic pledge really offers, what sets them apart, and how feasible their roadmaps are in confronting the nation's most pressing economic challenges. And for a closer look into this, we are joined by Shin Se-don, Professor of Business Economics at Sookmyung Women's University. Welcome to the program.
Good evening.
And also joining us is Chae Sang-mi, Professor of Business Administration at Ewha Women's University. Good to see you, Professor.
Good evening.
So let's start right away with Professor Shin. So on May 18th, like I've said, the four presidential candidates, Lee Jae-myung of the DP, Moon-soo of PPP, and Lee Jun-seok of the Reform Party, and Kwon Young-guk of the Democratic Labor Party faced off in the debate. And the spotlight was on overcoming low growth and jump-starting the everyday economy. I wonder, how would you assess the overall direction of the debate?
Well, they've been talking about a lot of issues, dozens of issues, everyone, which is very important and crucial for economic future and economic development. But unfortunately, I would say it was really difficult to say impressive in the sense that most of them are talking emotionally charged. And in some cases, some discussions have been pretty antagonistic against the other candidate. And most of the answers, were evasive, avoiding the direct answer to, because the issue is so important and so critical. So I think in general, I will say that it was not enough to persuade, every voters in the nation to confirm that someone in the candidate group could be hopeful to govern the future administration. So in general, assessment is not quite impressive to my standard, I should say.
It was a little bit more of a emotional and targeting each other right on that point. But yeah, so we want to elaborate on this debate now. So Professor Chae, could you lay down for us what kind of policies the candidates have proposed for solutions to, to revive our economy?
According to their discussion yesterday, that Lee Jae-myung actually focused on boosting demands itself. I think he believes that increasing government spending now will raise household spending and lead to overall growth. So his plan calls for extra budget allocation and large investment in areas like artificial intelligence, renewable energy, and cultural industry. And his idea is mainly that these moves will create more jobs and encourage private companies to invest. If you look at Kim Moon-soo's plan, he focuses on removing unnecessary regulation. He proposed to set up a regulatory reform commission and Ministry of Regulatory Innovation to review and ease rules and maybe holding back businesses. And his goal is to make it easier for business to operate and grow without increasing government debt. If you look at Lee Jun-seok's plan, he focused on improving productivity. Like he suggests adjusting minimum wage based on local condition. So his approach focused on small investments that add up to a more efficient economy. And lastly, Kwon Young-guk, he focused on tackling inequalities. So Kwon focused on reducing the gap between the rich and the poor. And his plan is to increase taxes on wealthier people instead of cutting taxes for them, aiming to redistribute income more fairly across society.
Right. Professor, thank you so much for clarifying that for us. So it seems like they're agreeing on the problem, but divergence on the cure is evident, and we'll really have to see how they move forward with it, navigate it later on. But now let's get a little bit deeper into the different pledges of these candidates. Democratic Party candidate Lee Jae-myung is proposing, like Professor Che has said, he's proposing swift supplementary budgeting paired with long-term investment in AI, renewable energy, and cultural industries as well. But since his strategy depends on aggressive fiscal expansion, some are concerned about the risk of worsening fiscal health. Professor Shin, as an economic expert, what's your evaluation on this?
Well, yeah, I mean, he proposed number of mega projects in the sense that each and every project he mentioned requires tens of trillions of Korean won. So if you add it up, it amounts to almost more than 150 trillion wons. And that is, I think, a tremendous amount of money, and everybody was talking about the supplementary budget of about 13 trillion just passed the Congress a few weeks ago. But according to his plans, I think we have to spend another 100 trillions within this year. And that amounts to about 150 trillion won, which is about 10% of our national, consumption demand, which is about 1,500 trillion a year. So, yeah, I mean, his plans are pretty audacious in the sense that he wants the government to participate in every aspect of Korean economy to boost Korean economic development, but it requires an astronomical amount of money, which we have to ask, where does the money come from? We already, Korean economy is already ridden with the national debt, which is more than 100% of GDP. So Korean government and the Korean nation is incapable of take another big, national debt. So considering the situation, I think Korean government, no matter who becomes the president next time, it's going to be quite restrictive in spending the money. And in that sense, I think it could sound a little irresponsible, to spend an astronomical amount of fiscal money when, Korea is facing another astronomical national debt. So I think it is pretty impossible for the government, no matter who becomes the president, because of the fiscal resources.
Right. So indeed, it was a big, bold bet on the fiscal muscle, though the purpose was, to revive the country. But the source of where you get the budget, it remains a question. Now, let's turn to the People Power Party's candidate, Kim Moon-soo, as well. He's called for sweeping deregulation, including new bodies like a regulatory reform committee and also a ministry for regulatory innovation. Professor Che, is this level of economic restructuring actually necessary to escape the low growth trap?
Yeah, I think so. As you know, many experts are really worried about our country's, slow growth in economy. So as you know, they expect 1.5% expected for 2025 this year. So it's a time, needs very bold action. So if you look at that, Kim Moon-soo's plan, he focused on cutting red tape. So by cutting red tape, business could reduce cost and become more competitive. And this could lead to faster growth without the need for more government spending. Also, fewer regulation might make South Korea more attractive to foreign investors, especially in high-tech areas such as biotech and renewable energy. And unlike adding more spending, easing regulation help growth without increasing the national debt, which is important when the debt level is already very high, like Korea. So, however, it's important to balance these changes with a safeguard to ensure that key rules for safety and fairness remain in place.
Right. So deregulation sounds like a reset button, but on the downside, tearing it down barriers too fast could bring also risks as well. But now let's also turn to Reform Party candidate Jun-seok. He offered a localized approach, rather, suggesting the minimum wage be adjusted by different regions. It's quite a bold departure from uniform policy. Professor Shin, how realistic do you think and effective could this be for struggling communities as well?
Before mentioning about the minimum wage, I will point out that the PPP is kind of agenda about the regulatory reform commission that is applicable under the premise that the government is the efficient organization, which I don't believe. Korean government, Korean officials in the government could not be efficient enough to lead industry in almost all areas. So just making that kind of a commission, or just making a department, or just making of a ministry, that would not help. That's going to make another trouble in the coming future. So that's one that I want to point it out. And to the candidate Lee Jun-seok's idea of regionally different minimum wage, which is just like what the Japan is taking right now. I think it is pretty fascinating idea, because in Korea, even though it's a small economy, population is over 50 million and diverse enough. So if you go outside, if you go to the rural side, the economy is totally different, from what you see in the metropolitan area. So minimum wage and working condition, and every standard of labor has to be differently applied to a different reason. In that respect, I think his idea is pretty good, and that's what I have been emphasizing for the last decade or so.
So if this is implemented well, then that kind of flexibility could breathe new life into this lagging regions. So execution.
It could solve a lot of problems. It could solve the development of the region. It could solve the the lack of job problem. It could solve diminishing rural area. So it could solve many problems with the unequal or different minimum wage according to the geographical region.
So we'll really have to see if the next administration, how this unfolds in the next administration's policies. Now, we'll also touch upon Democratic Labor Party candidate Kwon Young-guk, who's putting weight in inequality, not growth, front and center. He's pushing for wealth redistribution through increased taxes on the rich people's population. Professor Che, how would you assess this equity-focused economic philosophy?
Actually, Kwon's plan is very simple. Instead of giving tax bracket to the rich, he wants to raise taxes on wealth. So this approach is intended to bring about fair income distribution, as you said. So if you look at, but this kind of, a plan have both positive and, possible huge downside. So if you look at the positive effect, a wealth tax can generate extra money for essential services, for government like healthcare and education. Also, when the money is redistributed, people with a lower income often spend more, which can help boost the overall economy. However, if the tax is too high due to the wealth tax, there is a chance that wealthy individuals might move their money or leave the country forever. And high taxes on wealth might discourage people from investing in new and innovative business unless the rules are designed very carefully. So Kwon's focus on fairness looks like a very promising, but his plan must be designed to avoid the negative impact, as I mentioned, on investment and innovation and national economic growth.
Right. So redistribution of growth definitely it is a powerful message, especially in this polarized climate. But we'll have to see how the policy actually becomes executed. Now, in labor policy, labor is also a key issue, Professor Che. The fault lines were especially clear in the side. Democratic Party candidate Lee Jae-myung supports the yellow envelope law and a 4.5-day work week. And in contrast, People Power Party's Kim Moon-soo wants to reform the 52-hour work week through labor management consensus. How should voters interpret these very contrasting positions?
Actually, the Lee Jae-myung, as he said, he focused on worker protection. So he supports the so-called yellow envelope law, which aims to strengthen workers' rights by ensuring that subcontractors are treated fairly. Also, he focused on 4.5-day work week, is actually aimed at reducing worker fatigue and improving work-life balance with people hope that this will also boost the productivity. If you look at the Kim Moon-soo's proposal, he focused on modifying working hours. So instead of full changes like that of Lee Jae-myung, Kim prefers to adjust the current 52-hour work week rules. He believes that with a good negotiation between workers and employers, a more flexible system can be achieved without making a dramatic changes. So, if you look at Lee's plan, create a new set of protection and aim to reduce the work hours as a part of larger social reform. Kim's plan offers for a more gradual changes that hopes to balance the need of both employer and employees, reducing working hours only when it makes sense.
So this really draws the battle lines, workers' rights versus flexibility, and it's a clear window into each party's priorities as well. Now, let's also touch upon trade with the United States. Professor Shin, there's also a split in terms of candidates' priorities. Democratic Party candidate Lee Jae-myung says there's no rush to finalize tariff negotiations with Washington, while PPP's Kim Moon-soo insists on wrapping up talks before July 8th. What do you make of this, difference in stance?
I think it is urgent for Korean economy to make negotiations completed as soon as possible, as PPP leader would have suggested. But the problem is that's not determined by our own will. The key is in the hands of the United States. And we know the United States is in trouble because very astronomical tax especially against China, has kind of backfired on economic, situation in the United States. Plunging stock markets and skyrocketing prices in the main stores. So I think United States in a hurry to kind of calm down the aftermath of a high tariff. So I think it's a pretty smart, move for Korea to wait, not to hurry any kind of early negotiations. In that, I think, respect, I think, Lee Jae-myung's approach, not hurrying, too much, I think is a pretty smart, behavior, considering the situation that America is facing into right now.
Right. So considering the background, wait-and-see approach could be helpful in this current situation. Now, so all in all, Professor Shin, you've mentioned that largely the proposals were kind of vague on funding details, which raises questions about feasibility. So when voters look at the economic pledges from all the parties, Professor Shin, where should they actually place most weight on?
Well, among the unimpressive discussions yesterday, most important issue that was brought up in the discussion is deregulation. I'm not talking about deregulatory body or commission whatsoever. I think deregulation is crucial for Korean economy, and I think opposition party realizes that. right? So the key issue is whether the parliament, which is taking control of the Congress right now, will agree, right, what the PPP are suggesting in terms of deregulation or, deregulatory bodies. So I think that for the next 6 months after the new administration, everything depends upon how successful Congress and the government comes up with the revolutionary deregulatory kind of a framework. I think that doesn't cost that much, right? So I think all we need is a political consensus, and I think this is very much possible.
Mm-hmm. So whoever wins, whoever takes the next administration, let's really hope for better cooperation with the Congress to move forward with policies that are in strain. Now, we will have to conclude our discussion right here, I'm afraid, but thank you so much for making time for us and giving us your insights tonight, Professor Che and Professor Shin. We appreciate it so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Until then, stay informed and engaged.